All right, this will be my update for Sprint 4, final update of the class. Um, I will initially go through the Sprint update document, kind of talk about what I did this week, where I'm at, and then I've got a couple of things that I'll show and talk about as well for some things that I put together in Lucidchart. So let's see, pull this up and switch over. All right, so start off top here. So for currently working on, I spent this sprint mostly working on getting my LAN set up. Um, did a little bit of work on the WAN as well. Um, I've done some schematics for layer 1 and 2 and layer 3 topologies for the LAN. Also put together a topology for the WAN as well with some of the kind of basic layouts that I'm going to use in that. I feel like I've finalized version 1, we'll say, of what my LAN is going to look like. I feel like for the most part, the structural layout of it is designed and put together, and how I'm going to do it for the initial implementation. Imagine that there will probably be some minor tweaks that would be needed moving forward, and potentially some upgrades or additions as time progresses and the network is developed further. Um, let's see. I decided to do a collapse core, which I kind of talked to you about. I'm using VRRP between those two devices to create a unified virtual routing instance, and basically letting that function as a first hop on the WAN network. Um, Doing a switch stack of, did decide on using two Cisco 2960X switches because I can use those in a stack formation, and have those service the vSphere server system. Um, I feel like as redundancy, it made sense to provide plenty of bandwidth, some failover protection, and plenty of ports if I needed to maybe extend some of the host instances that I have there, to further add some computational and storage to the server system. So it seemed like that would be pretty robust and would be pretty easy to add in additional servers with ESXi hosts to further bolster out that cluster. Um, like I said, I kind of roughed out what I think the WAN's going to look like. It's pretty simple. I was just going to do like um, two routers basically functioning as the edge devices. Each of those, or two routers at each site rather, um, they'll be interlinked and then linked to that core, and then they will each point to one of the other campuses. So there will be redundancy there, and worst case scenario, there is some failover redundancy, and um, I also threw in some GRE tunneling with IPsec, based off of your advice. Um, I set that up and actually did do a test case on it, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I set that up and put the encryption on it, such that each of the first hop devices on the three campuses will have that private tunnel with encryption laid over top of that. Let's see. I did a couple of test cases, so I've got that a little bit more fleshed out as far as the project is concerned. I did one testing that VRRP for failover redundancy. I basically built that out in GNS3. I ran into an issue. I was initially trying to use uh, iOS V, but it looked like the images that I had did not support VRP. It looked like they, from what I read, they did support some layer 3, but they didn't support that. So I basically figured I can still demonstrate the functionality of VRP by using just two routers, which would actually support that protocol. So I built it out in Machine S3. I did two routers representing that switching group, the core, that switch pair, set up VRP on them, placed an access switch on either side as well as a host device attached to the access switch. Pushed a constant ping across one device to the other, or one host to the other, and then I used Wireshark on the outgoing ports of the two routers that had the VRP on it. Wireshark showed that the data was being transmitted out of um, the master of the VRRP pair, and when I shut that off, traffic was rerouted across what was the backup and had become the master pair, master of the pair. Um, the Wireshark displayed that. You could see where the instance that was attached to the master had the packets pushing through it. And then once that was shut down, they started appearing on the other instance of Wireshark. So demonstrating that it was able to go. You could look at the host and see that it had only had maybe 2 interrupted pings in the series. And you can further verify it through looking at the router, which was in the backup position. It had log notifications saying that it had shifted from the backup to master status. So I was able to demonstrate that that will work and get some actual video recording of that. I'm not going to show that in this because I'm going to show it in the final presentation at the end, so you'll get to see it in a couple days. Second test case that I did was to set up that GRE tunnel and then do the IPsec overlay. I used the notes that you had on Blackboard, and I basically just set up a single campus to campus instance of what IWAN would look like. I set up, again, a router, just a single instance to represent the VRP core pair, and I ran a GRE tunnel from one core to the other, and then did the IPsec overlay, used Wireshark in the middle of that, and pulled packets off of it. And you could see in the packets that the origination and destination addresses were for the public-facing addresses and not for the private tunnel addresses. And Wireshark also showed the data was encrypted and could not discern specifically what it was. So that demonstrated the encryption and the tunneling as well. Yeah. So that was kind of what I spent this week on. I did a lot of work with doing the Lucidchart stuff, with finalizing kind of LAN design, trying to put something together for WAN. Again, I went pretty simple on that, just kind of single area OSPF interconnection, and then the GRE tunnel over top of that. Yeah, so that's what I did this last sprint. I've also been doing a lot of work in my tech spec doc, especially in the last couple of days, trying to take all the information that I have and get it pushed into that, and kind of flesh that out some more. So as far as challenges and upcoming stuff, I feel like at this point that I've got a pretty good layout and idea of kind of how things are going to look structurally. There's definitely pieces that are still need some kind of fleshing out and refining. But I think from a design perspective, I'm probably going to basically stop where I'm at and focus on making sure that my documentation is put together. Um, I talk a little bit in this about what I think I would do were I going into a sprint 5 rather than being preparing for the presentation. I think I would kind of try to spend some time working on addressing security and monitoring for the LAN specifically. I'd like to do some incorporation of SDN. Right now, it's basically just kind of theoretical as something that I would do moving forward. I looked a little bit at ODL, but I just didn't get a chance to really work with that much or kind of do any kind of overlay over any sections of the WAN. So that would be kind of my next step here in this next sprint, work on those things, and then probably do some test cases around that, looking at potentially um, some LAN security and maybe some network monitoring of what's going on and kind of management through that SDN. Um, my actual plans for the next week are to shore up the rest of my tech spec doc and then start prepping for this presentation. Um, I think that I might spend a little more time tonight and then the rest of tomorrow working on that. And then the plan will be that Wednesday and Thursday will be spent prepping for the presentation. Um, I've got my test case videos. I need to do a little editing on those and make sure that they're set up. I'm going to try and put together a PowerPoint or Google Slides presentation that I can utilize during the presentation, kind of similar to what you'll see now, where I'll show a screen, work through that, and probably keep a video in the corner so you can kind of see me as I'm talking through it. I would like to try and set up some integration of my test case videos into slides just for continuity and smoothness. We'll see how much effort and time that takes. Worst case scenario, I can just have the QuickTime pulled up and swipe over to that really quick and play it while I'm doing a screen record. Let's see what else. My plan is work on getting a presentation put together on Wednesday and Thursday and to really try to get it recorded on Thursday, just in case so that there's not any issues and kind of have Friday as a bailout or to do some editing or refinement of whatever and then get it submitted. And that'll be it. As far as final tech spec, I'm gonna put a link to the Google Doc that of my tech spec at the bottom of the sprint update. And if you want to use that when you look through, if that's okay, I'd like to do that because I'll be working on it probably some more tonight, even from this point. And it would be beneficial if you're able to see what my most current version is, if there's any feedback that you're going to give. So I'll have a link for that, and maybe I'll just or upload a static version of it along with this. So I worked on, with the tech spec, I did some of the Lucidchart schematics that I put together. I've got those incorporated. Did one for the distributed switch, did one for the LAN for an L1, L2 layer, and then also an L3. And then I did a single one of kind of the WAN architecture as well. So all of those been put in there. Put all of the information for test cases, for use cases, and then the results of the test cases are in there. And then I've been adding in some like reference documents for configurations, been trying to put in some of the hardware installation guides as well as software installation guides. I need to work on some of the wiring scheme. I've got a document that I'm sort of working on, but it needs some restructuring because I shifted some stuff. But I'm going to maybe try and work on that as well. We'll just see what I've got time-wise. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at for tech spec. As far as carried over stuff, there's two things in there that were use cases that would relate to what I would be doing were I going into a Sprint 5, so talking about security and network monitoring. It's hard for me to put together a use case without having those pieces like fully designed and fleshed out. So I would carry those into the next sprint. And then I also carried over a card that was with, talked about firewall solution for my ISP. I was thinking about using pfSense on a server that would also be servicing DHCP for like a public Wi-Fi access that would be present. Although I don't know if that would even really be necessary. That was kind of what I was thinking, is that the school may be providing that, and so that's not even really necessary within this network. Anyway, that would be something I would be working through in this next sprint. As far as lessons learned so far, I'm not going to read through all of this, but basically it just kind of reiterates a lot of what we had talked about earlier this week, or earlier last week, rather. I feel like I definitely have a better grasp of kind of what the the agile process is and kind of how to utilize that. I mean, when we talked about it, I feel like Sprint 3 was like kind of a breakthrough sprint, for lack of a better way to describe that, of being able to kind of understand that process and apply it through that 2 week sprint that was pretty challenging, but come out of it feeling pretty excited about what I had and feeling like I had benefited from that process. So, I mean, that I went into this sprint feeling pretty good about that, motivated, and I think that it carried through again. I was able to get some tangible work done, kind of like I did in the previous sprint, which was satisfying. So, I mean, I talk a little bit about, not knowing exactly where I'm at, not feeling 100% sure about whether I'll even be able to pass the class or not. But I do feel good about where I'm at. I set a goal early on that I was going to stick with the class, regardless of kind of how things were panning out, and just try and pull as much out of it as I can. And worst case scenario, I'll just take it again in the fall and be much better prepared for that. As I note at the end of this, I obviously would love to pass and move forward, but I feel like it's been a good experience regardless. So, really quickly, I'll just show you a couple of these Lucidchart docs. So this one is the finalized version of the, I guess, layer 1 and 2 structuring of the LAN network. This will be a switch stack of those two 2960s that'll attach to the vSphere. You got your core here using VRRP, ISP coming in with firewall, and then 2 access switches that will service the end users, each with their own network, which is indicated on here. And then this is kind of a representation of more of a L3 setup. So address networks with default gateways set up on this collapsed core here. And then your 2 edge devices, which will point out to one campus and the other. And then the representation of the virtualized single instance for routing purposes of that VRRP. Did one of the, oh, here we go. One of the distributed switch that is inside my vCenter instance. Basically, I kind of tried to pull from what the vCenter presents as a topology and kind of duplicate that somewhat so it would look pretty similar to what your final product should look like in vCenter. I figured that would be helpful and useful for someone that's putting it together to be able to reference this. It does have the addressing for the VM kernel ports and their management, vMotion, direct access to the LAN, so pushing data onto the LAN, and then your 4 ISCI target routes. And then this can be utilized to some extent for understanding how the ESXi instances will be linked as far as physical adapters and what's going to be coming out of the NIC cards on those. So got that put together, and then yeah, so switch this over here, and I yeah, I feel pretty good about where I'm at. I think there's a lot left to be done on the project, but like we discussed, that's kind of part of it. And I feel pretty good about what I've got put together. Trying to do a little more to flesh out that tech spec talk, and then get ready to do a 40-minute presentation. So um, yeah, I appreciate your help the other day too. It was good to talk to you, one, about the specific kind of land questions, but kind of more broadly about the class itself. So I'm gonna sign off, and I'll speak with you again on Friday when I upload that video.